All right, so the Supreme Court today ruled that people who are seeking asylum, many of them have no right to a federal court hearing to determine whether or not their credible fear interview was determined properly. So what happens is it was a 7-2 decision, and I'll break it down for you in a second. It's a 7-2 decision. It allows the Trump administration to basically fast track the removal process and deportation of thousands of immigrants. At issue is whether a federal immigration law that aims to reduce meritless asylum claims through expedited processing violated immigrants' due process rights under the Constitution. So what happens is when you apply for asylum, whether it's at the border or at an airport, or you've entered the United States and then subsequently apply for asylum, you get what's called a credible fear interview. And the credible fear interview is mostly done at the border or in the airport. And you have to make some sort of claim that under law, if you're able to prove the facts, they're not asking you whether or not prove these facts or not. They're just making a claim. And an officer says, if he can prove these facts, would this person be able to be granted asylum? So as long as you make some claim under law that your life would be in danger or your life you would be persecuted if you were returned home because you're part of a group that is being persecuted, that would make you eligible to pass your credible fear in an airport situation or in a situation where you're at the border applying for asylum. So for example, let's say you come to the United States and you apply for asylum and you say, I'm making this up, I have no idea. I'm from Jamaica, and I'm a homosexual, and if I return to Jamaica, they persecute homosexuals in Jamaica, and I'm going to get beat up. I may be killed. I may be tortured. That would pass a credible fear interview because you're part of a group that is being persecuted. Now, take the same person. I come from Jamaica. I'm applying for asylum because I can't get a job in Jamaica. Well, that's not a claim for asylum. You wouldn't pass your credible fear interview, and you would get deported. So what they're saying, what the Supreme Court decision is saying, is that these credible fear interviews at the airport and at the border, they cannot be appealed into federal court. It's now up to a judge or an immigration officer to determine whether or not you pass that credible fear. You just have to make a colorable claim for asylum. So for those who are thinking about coming to the United States to a border to apply for asylum, you got to think ahead of time. What are you going to say in order to pass your credible fear interview? Other than that, they may deport you right there on the spot. Now, Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the majority, the court long ago held that Congress is entitled to set the conditions for an alien's lawful entry into this country, and that as a result, an alien at the threshold of initial entry cannot claim any greater rights under the Due Process Clause. So basically what they're saying is the Constitution does not apply. It's always been like that. The Constitution does not apply until you make an entry into the United States of America. It's the same thing when you come to the United States and they summarily exclude you or summarily deport you at the airport. It's called a summary removal hearing. You have a bad visa, you have a criminal record, you've made a misrepresentation. You don't have a right to see a federal judge. You don't have a right to even see a lawyer until you enter the United States of America. Only after you pass immigration and you step foot in America does the Constitution count for you. And I think the Supreme Court decision is an extension of that, in essence, saying that the Constitution does not apply until you get past the airport or until you get past the border crossing. Now, Donald Trump also today, as of April 22nd, he changed work permit rules for asylum. So if you apply for asylum now, up till August 22nd, you have to wait 150 days to apply for a work permit. Now it's going to be 1 year. So if you apply for asylum, you cannot apply for a work permit for 1 year. You have to basically live, day to day. I don't know how you would live. How would somebody live without a work permit, without getting a job? Well, lots of people do it. Obviously, you're working illegally, you're working off the books. But now part of this rule changes if you're applying for asylum and you work illegally and you don't pay taxes on that illegal employment and then apply for a work permit. Not only are you going to be denied the work permit, but you can be denied asylum for not paying taxes on that illegal employment. And then a lot of people are going to say, well, how do you pay a tax without a social security number? I mean, it gets extraordinarily complicated. As a result, all of this is designed by Donald Trump to prevent people from applying for asylum, just like what they do at the border where they meter you. They say, we're only going to have a certain amount of credible fear interviews on any particular day. So all of this is designed by Donald Trump to basically end asylum to the United States, make it so difficult for people to apply for asylum, make it so difficult for people to live here when they apply for asylum, that people just pick other countries to go apply for asylum. And it's all extraordinarily sad. But the good news is we have an election coming up. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit. Meanwhile, Trump, a federal court in California, said that Trump cannot divert money from the Pentagon to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. In a 2-to-1 ruling, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said the transfer of $2.5 billion circumvented Congress, which holds the authority to appropriate money. The legal fight over the Defense Department funds stems from Trump's national emergency declaration on the U.S.-Mexico border last year. He said it's a national emergency, and because we are being invaded by immigrants on the border, which we weren't, but because we are, it was a made-up thing, I'm diverting funds for our national security to the border to build a fence. Well, there is no more national emergency right now. There's not a lot of people on the border. There may be a few, but not as many as was under the second Bush, certainly not as many under Obama. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said that it is the Congress that decides where the money is spent, not President Trump. And that kind of, goes to Trump's whole entire thing. He just grabs power and nobody says anything. He takes money that's supposed to go to the military. Our Congress gave money to the military, and he just takes it for whatever he wants. And it's similar to what he did with this executive order ban on immigration, banning groups of people. I don't know where in the law it says that he's allowed to do this. I was just having a conversation with Moshe, the bulldozer, earlier this week. And I was saying to him, and he's our personal injury attorney, where does Trump get the power to decide entire groups of people can't get green cards anymore? Where does he get the power to say certain people, if you are a child of a U.S. citizen over 21, you can't get a green card. If you're a spouse of a permanent resident, no more green cards for you. Where does he get the power to do this? Because it is Congress that makes the law, and it's President Trump that administers the law. And he can't just decide. I don't know where it says in any law or in the Constitution where he can just decide, I choose not to enforce the law, and I also choose to change the law without even Congress getting involved. And in essence, Moshe said to me, he said, well, he signed it. He took the power. He said it's going to happen, and nobody's saying anything to him otherwise. So I'm waiting for all of these aggrieved groups. I'm not a constitutional attorney. I'm an immigration attorney, but there are constitutional attorneys out there that are going to bring legal actions against Donald Trump, because I think it's just an obscene power grab by the president and totally usurping the powers of Congress and the separation of powers between Congress and the president. But we'll talk about that more later. Meanwhile, we wanted to talk about this yesterday. Yesterday was Tamir Rice's birthday. Now, Tamir Rice would have turned 18 years old yesterday. I'm sure most people remember that in 2014, 12-year-old Tamir was shot by a police officer at the park across the street from his house in Cleveland, Ohio. Tamir died the next day. His mother, Samaria Rice, told USA Today that the pain of Tamir's loss is still fresh in her mind. She wants her son to be remembered as a happy child with an infectious smile who liked to eat chicken nuggets, play video games, go swimming, and ride his bike around the neighborhood. It sounds like my son when he was 12. My son would eat chicken nuggets, play video games, and ride his bike. That's all he did too. I sympathize. All right, any parent would sympathize. Now, since her son's death, Samaria has traveled to colleges to speak out against police brutality. In 2016, she founded the Tamir Rice Foundation, which advocates for police reform. She told USA Today she couldn't eat or sleep after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. She said Rayshard Brooks' death reinforced her belief the police need better training. Now, she is also building the Tamir Rice Afrocentric Cultural Center in Cleveland. It will house after-school programs focused on tutoring, mentoring, arts, music, and dancing for inner-city young people. Now, I had recently spoke with Amanda D. King and Kelsey Carter of Shooting Without Bullets, a Cleveland-based art program that was created in response to the tragic murder of 12-year-old Tamir. The program is offered to teenagers and works to combat social injustices by providing an artistic outlet for Black and Brown youth. They also work with Tamir Rice and her daughter, Tahaje, who was with her brother at the time of the shooting. And let's watch a clip from our interview. What are you discussing politically with your students?
It started as a response to state-sanctioned violence after the murder of Tamir Rice. Cleveland has had decades of racial tension between the residents and the police. Police terror has been in the Cleveland's legacy for a very long time, but we're looking at the contemporary moment. Right. And so when I started Shooting Without Bullets, the first response, the most immediate and urgent, was police brutality and the need for police reform, because we know that young people have the most interactions with police. Police are everywhere where young people congregate. They're in the malls, they're on the subways and trains, they're in schools, and most of our young people live in over-policed neighborhoods. But as soon as I hit the pavement, Tanisha Anderson and Tamir Rice were murdered that November, and ever since that, I've been boots on the ground.
You're also working closely with Tamir Rice's mom. Now, 5 years ago, Tamir was shot. He had like a toy gun. He was 12 years old.
It's a toy. Yes.
A cop shot him right in the stomach, if I recall. And
yes, within less than 1 second.
And the sister got thrown in the back of the car when she was handcuffed.
Yes.
Right. So you're working with them. How did you get involved working with them?
So when I started Shooting Without Bullets, it was a response to the murder of Tamir and working with young people to get their voices at decision-making tables. And I knew that this was a time where young people really felt the weight of the oppression, the weight of the system on them physically and emotionally. And so I knew that I needed to have some type of therapeutic and cathartic process for them also. And I knew at the time somebody who was studying art therapy. And so she was doing a project with Miss Rice, and she introduced Miss Rice to me and said, Amanda's doing this great program, you should consider Tahaje being in it. And Miss Rice said, I don't know. And I think one day Miss Rice had to go to court or something, and she needed to drop her off. So she came to the program, and it was all love. So
wow, so Tahaje's gone through your program.
Yes, she is.
How is she doing?
She's a regular teenager.
Really?
That's what I would like to describe her as. I don't want to describe her trauma. I don't want to put her in the box of somebody who is not going to be able to heal or who's forever going to live this moment. She's a regular teenager. She loves to laugh. She loves to watch TV. She likes to hang out with her girlfriends. Like, that's the Tahaje that I want the world to see. I mean, of course, she lost her brother in a very horrific way. She was traumatized by being handcuffed and put in the back of the police car. But as a young girl, I'd hate for me to put that narrative on her.
I'd like to say that, especially for Black and brown youth and in Cleveland, trauma unfortunately seems to be such a normal part of everyday life.
So sad.
Yeah, we just learn how to move through it.
Right. How's Tamir's mom doing?
Miss Rice, she's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
She's a force to be reckoned with. But she's not looking at just the individual officers, Timothy Loman and Frank Garnback. She's looking at the whole system. The whole system, from the prosecutor to the police chief to the mayor to city council. She's looking at all of them, and she's really strategically thinking about ways to attack and say, listen, no more children dying on this soil in Cleveland, Ohio.
That interview was done, I don't know, at least 8, 9, 10 months ago, well before the whole George Floyd protest in response to the George Floyd killing. And it really goes to show that there were a lot of people who were organized and promoting police reform and bringing these situations to the attention of the public. And it just unfortunately took another killing to basically energize everybody to open their eyes to see what's going on here in the United States of America. Now, on Wednesday, the Glynn County, Georgia grand jury indicted 3 white men arrested in the killing of African-American jogger Ahmaud Arbery. The indictment includes 9 counts against each of the 3 defendants, Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and William Bryan. They face malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. The men are facing life sentences without parole. District Attorney Joyette M. Holmes said, "This is another step forward in seeking justice for Ahmaud. We will continue to be intentional in the pursuit of justice for this family and the community at large as the prosecution of this case continues." On Tuesday, the state Senate in Georgia, largely because of Arbery's killing, passed a hate crimes bill that had been approved last year by the Georgia State House. Georgia has been one of 4 states without a hate crime law. We were talking about the asylum and Donald Trump changing the work permit laws. And I said, well, we're going to have an election soon. Well, right now, if the election were held today, according to every credible poll, whether it's conservative polls on Fox News, liberal polls from CNN or MSNBC, Donald Trump is facing the prospect of a landslide loss, an enormous loss by Donald Trump, as well as the Senate is looking at this point that it is extraordinarily possible that the Democrats not only will be in the White House with Joe Biden, that they are going to take control of the U.S. Senate and will also keep control of the House of Representatives. And now, the election's 5 months from now, but a half a dozen new swing state polls released Thursday morning suggest that not only would President Trump lose if the election were held today, he's going to lose in a landslide. These particular surveys were conducted by the New York Times and Siena College. They show Trump trailing Joe Biden by double digits in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, by mid-single digits in North Carolina, Arizona, and Florida. They are neck and neck. Trump is neck and neck with Biden in Texas. A Quinnipiac University poll released at the start of this month had Biden within a point of Trump in Texas. Now, if Biden managed to win Texas, he'd have 395 electoral votes, the largest electoral vote haul since George Bush beat Michael Dukakis in '88. That's assuming that the Democratic states that traditionally vote Democrat are going to continue to vote Democrat, and the Republican states that continue to vote Republican will. They're swing states. This is where the election is won or lost, and there's more swing states now than in an extraordinarily long time. Who would have ever thought that a Democrat could possibly win Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, Florida? If you remember the hanging Chad from 2000, George W. Bush beat Al Gore by 9 votes because in Florida, 9 votes separated Al Gore from being president versus George W. 9 votes in Pennsylvania. Imagine how the world would have been different. Would we have gone to war in Iraq if Al Gore was president of the United States? I doubt it. And what a different world we would be in. And it was 9 voters in Florida, or 30 voters in Florida, but it was under 100 voters in Florida with hanging Chads. They were debating hanging Chads all the way up to the Chad being a little piece of paper hanging from the punch-in card, all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Had Gore won Florida, he would have been president. Now, for Biden to win, he just needs, and assuming the Democrats, Democratic states stay Democrat, and there's no reason not to believe New York's going to vote Republican. There's no reason to believe California is going to vote Republican. Biden just needs one of these states to win, and he's winning in all of them right now: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Florida, and Texas. And Texas, he's even with Trump right now. Meanwhile, Trump administration has told the Supreme Court of the United States that Obamacare must fail. Now, this is all despite surging coronavirus cases and the fact that 500,000 Americans have turned to Obamacare during the pandemic. Trump administration doesn't care. They have reaffirmed its position that the Affordable Care Act, which everyone knows as Obamacare, is unconstitutional. They have this is now the 3rd case going up to the Supreme Court by a Republican administration trying to get rid of Obamacare. Now, the Trump administration is claiming that Obamacare is illegal because Congress eliminated the individual tax penalty for failing to purchase medical insurance. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said in a statement, President Trump and the Republicans campaign to rip away the protections and benefits of the Affordable Care Act in the middle of a coronavirus crisis that is unfathomable and that is cruel. The case before the High Court began with a lawsuit calling for the elimination of Obamacare brought by 20 states led by Texas, which, by the way, is leading the United States right now in coronavirus. The lawsuit bears the name, actually, Texas versus the United States. Texas has the highest uninsured rate in the country. Before the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, it still has the highest uninsured rate of people who do not have medical insurance in the United States of America. And this is because Texas does not participate in the expansion of Medicaid. Despite all of this, and despite Texas leading the United States right now, or about to lead the United States right now in coronavirus, they're the ones who want to get rid of Obamacare. Now, according to the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, enrollment in Texas in Obamacare is 1.12 million people. Yet Texas, in the middle of coronavirus, and they're actually closing down parts of Texas now. They're not allowing people in bars because it's rampant in Texas. The Texas Attorney General wants to take 1.12 million people's health insurance away. It's just crazy. It is just, I want to go now. I don't even know what to say about it. It's so crazy. Meanwhile, according to the statistics from the Johns Hopkins University, there are now over 9.6 million. And by the way, that's why Joe Biden is going to kill Trump in a landslide, unless something drastically happens. Unless coronavirus miraculously disappears, like Trump says, it's going to disappear. Whoosh! Miracle. Abracadabra. Abracadabra. It disappears. Or unless everybody finds a job in the next 5 months, I don't see how Trump wins. So meanwhile, according to statistics from Johns Hopkins University, there are over 9.6 million coronavirus cases worldwide. More than 491,000 people have died. The United States set a daily record for coronavirus cases yesterday in a return to figures not seen since last April. According to data collected by Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Resource Center, 40,000 new cases were recorded on June 25th. The United States continues to lead the world in both cases and deaths. And in its first briefing in weeks, the White House Coronavirus Taskforce today renewed calls for vigilance. As a matter of fact, I think what they want to do, which would be a very smart thing on behalf of the United States, is it's all about testing people. And the reason that, and you say, well, how does Germany and Israel, both countries that have very few coronavirus cases, how are they being able to test so many people? They're doing these pooling of tests. So basically what they're doing is they're taking 30 samples from 30 different people, putting it together in one test tube and seeing if that test tube comes back positive or negative. If it comes back negative, they don't have to test all 30 people. If it comes back positive, then they go and test all 30 people. And they're able to then take, with a limited testing capability, multiply the number of tests that they can do in any given day by 30 times. So they're testing millions and millions of people every day by doing this pooling. And I think, one of the things that this coronavirus task force is looking into, and which I think is a smart thing, I've read up on it, not that I'm a scientist, is to do these pooling of coronavirus tests. And we can talk about it more if the United States actually decides to do it. What's amazing is we haven't heard from the coronavirus task force in a while. Trump wanted to get rid of coronavirus task force. If he doesn't talk about the coronavirus anymore, it doesn't exist. That was his thinking. If he doesn't talk about it, it doesn't exist. If you go to Fox News, they don't talk about coronavirus. If you go to Fox News right now, coronavirus is probably the 10th or 15th, maybe the 20th story on their website. They never talk about coronavirus. Why? Because if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. It's a farce. It's a fraud. Meanwhile, the only fraud is Donald Trump, where he's president of the United States. 200,000 people are going to die from coronavirus before September 30th. We went to a war in Vietnam, and we lost a lot of good men, 50 some odd thousand men. And we say that is a tragedy. Yet 200,000, and that was a war that took 7-8 years. 200,000 people are going to die in the United States before the end of September, between March and September in 6 months. And people are walking around like coronavirus doesn't exist. You look at Fox News, it's the 15th story on their website. Donald Trump says we're going to disband the Coronavirus Taskforce. Why? Because if we don't talk about it every day, it doesn't exist. Meanwhile, the 3 most populous states set records this week for daily new coronavirus cases, and there are fears of an apocalyptic surge in major cities. Texas, as we talked about, announced Wednesday that they recorded more than 5,000 new coronavirus cases today. California reported more than 7,000. The only good news, if there's any good news about coronavirus, is that we have a lot of smart doctors and a lot of smart nurses who have figured out, I believe, how to treat people with coronavirus. That doesn't mean they're going to save every last person, but I believe the protocols for treatment, they know how to deal with people better than when they did in the beginning. I've spoken to a lot of doctors who feel very confident that the percentage of people who are going to die, although coronavirus is still going to kill a lot of people, but the percentage is going to go down because we know how to treat better. Now, to give you an idea how bad coronavirus is in California, Disney is postponing the reopening of Disneyland, which has been planned for July 17th. And that is the 65th anniversary, the opening day of Disneyland Park. So they're not going to be open on their anniversary. And no new opening date has been announced. Florida has reported 9,000 positive cases on Thursday. However, Disney World in Florida is still set to reopen on July 11th. Now, in Texas, if the current case trajectory continues, Houston was going to be the hardest hit city in the United States with numbers rivaling Brazil. And Dr. Peter Hotez, the dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at the Baylor College of Medicine, told CNN's Anderson Cooper that the big metro areas seem to be rising very quickly, and some of the models are on the verge of being apocalyptic. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced yesterday that the state's going to pause any further reopening of its economy. The state also saw 47 new fatalities, bringing the cumulative number of deaths in Texas to 2,296 people. Texas was among the first states to begin reopening. Many businesses are back in operation, but Governor Abbott did halt elective surgeries in 4 of the state's largest counties. Houston's Texas Medical Center, often referred to as the largest medical center in the world, showed that its ICU beds for coronavirus were at 97% of normal capacity, which means they can only hold a couple, maybe 100 more people who need ventilators, who need to be in the ICU, God forbid. Arizona and New Mexico also joined Texas in holding off on reopening efforts amid the surge in coronavirus. Now, in the midst of Texas's surge, the White House announced plans to end federal funding for 13 community-based coronavirus testing sites. The move, confirmed by NBC News, affects 7 sites in Texas. The 6 others are in Illinois, New Jersey, Colorado, and Pennsylvania. What the hell? Why are they doing this? I don't have the slightest idea. CDC said coronavirus cases in the United States may be 10 times higher than previously reported. The assessment comes from looking at blood samples across the country for the presence of antibodies. Dr. Jay Butler, he's the head of the COVID response at the CDC, said that there is not an exact cutoff of age at which people should or should not be concerned. But Dr. Robert Redfield, the director of the CDC, said the virus causes so much asymptomatic infection. The traditional approach of looking for symptomatic illness and diagnosing it obviously is totally misunderstood. I don't know if you saw about the Amazon driver captured in the delivery of a box to a Lynn Stafari, and this was in Delaware. A Delaware mom recently shared a video from her Nest camera showing an Amazon driver going above and beyond. Lynn Stafari's 13-year-old son, Jacob, included a very unusual instruction for the delivery in Amazon. You know, you could always put, when you do the Amazon, you could always say, they say additional instructions, like, walk up this, where, my front door is on the 2nd flight or whatever it is that, additional instructions to get your package. Well, Jacob wrote for the additional instructions, knock on the door 3 times and scream abracadabra as loud as you can and run super fast away. Let's watch what the delivery. Abracadabra! So she actually did it. So Stafari said the driver's attention to detail made the whole family smile. Jacob's order was a playpen for kittens they're fostering at their home. Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.